I think that when we think about artificial intelligence in the conservative movement, the question is, what is the conservative position on AI? Right? I mean, when we talk about pro-life, we talk about gun control, we talk about national security, things of that sort, taxes, we sort of know where people are on a 90-10 scale in the conservative movement. But it's less so, I think, right now. Some people think that's because we're at a nascent state in AI. We're really not, obviously. Since 1956, we've had this term, and there's been an enormous trajectory more recently. But I think that the most important thing that I'd like to focus on is the narrative war over artificial intelligence, because whoever controls the policy and controls the culture and ultimately the people. I do work at Breitbart. I wear many other hats, but Andrew obviously famously said politics is downstream from culture. I think that tech elites believe that code is upstream from culture and therefore can control and affect the citizenry in a very direct and powerful way. AI is the most, I think, powerful political weapon. I don't think it is a tool. I think it is an information system that will touch virtually every policy dimension that all of the people in here and in this conference and beyond work on, whether you're talking about education, whether you're talking about national security, certainly in economics and jobs, which is going to be the focal point of some remarks that I would like to make. I really want to do three things today because we certainly want to hear from everybody and have a conversation with you. The first is I want to tell you a story that I think frames the stakes of the narrative war. The second is to talk about agentic AI, and then thirdly, to talk about what I call fractal truths, things that will scale macro and micro to help us to navigate through what is coming and what is already here. The story actually starts well before ChatGPT's public-facing arrival. It starts 6 years before that, in 2016. And there was a young man, and he had an audacious idea. And his audacious idea was he wanted to do a $60 million social experiment. And he wanted to give $1,000 to low-income people with no strings attached. And he was going to do this in pilot programs. He was going to do it for several years. He meant what he said. He put in $14 million of the $60 million of his own money. And the reason he said he wanted to do this, he put up on a blog post, and I'm reading directly from his blog. As technology eliminates jobs and massive new wealth gets created, we're going to see some version of this at a national scale. Now, all of us in here recognize this to be universal basic income, or UBI. But then he dropped the mask a little more and let the mask slip even beyond that. In his blog comments, he wrote, "I think one day it will seem ridiculous," this is a direct quote, "that fear of not eating was how we motivated people economically." Now, for free market people and people that believe in a sort of the Judeo-Christian work ethic and the rest of it, that's a pretty strident statement, right? You're really snapping the hinge of the human motivation for economic flourishing, not just in terms of your own personal identity, your own ability to feed yourself and your family, but also to build wealth and security for your progeny. That man's name was Sam Altman. And of course, today he runs OpenAI. He has been a very strong donor for democratic causes up until the recent new administration had given exclusively to Democrats. For centuries, America's soul thrived on free markets, powered by this notion of striving. And this question is now, is the mode of AI going to mean that work is outdated, dependency is progress, and leisure is the future? That really is the narrative war, and that's what I would like to talk about. Whether or not that comes to pass, that's why we have these conversations, and I think we need to be having these conversations. I personally am very concerned that at the grassroots level, we're really not fully as coached up on these topics and really thinking through the five-dimensional chess that we're going to be confronting. Our usual place is a default position of conservatives defaulting to answering automation with the same refrain, right? Oh, I've heard this before. The robots are coming. It never happens. Jobs get created. Jobs get destroyed. The free market will work it out. But of course, this time the AI titans claim this will be different. And we're talking about Mustafa Demirtas, Dario Amodei, obviously Sam Altman, Mustafa Suleyman at Microsoft AI. Some conservatives kick back and say, well, look, LLMs are just stochastic parrots. It's nothing but a fancy autocomplete, nothing to see here. Even Jan LeCun claims that an LLM is no smarter than your average house cat. This isn't going to be an economic threat the way that it's been postured. But of course, those who study AI and are certainly building it have quite a rejoinder to make. And that is the crux of the point, which is going to be agentic AI. And whether or not the promises we're hearing from, just recently, 2 months ago, Anthropic's Dario Amodei, saying that you're going to see the vaporization of 50% of white-collar entry-level positions. Many of the young people in this room, many of us have children or are having families, and that is a big concern there. If you've played with agentic AI, you might, again, feel like, well, it's very nascent. We've still got all these problems with hallucinations. You're going to have all sorts of issues with permissions. And the rest of it, whether you're talking about Perplexity's Comet or OpenAI's Operator. But here's the narrative plot twist for us, I think, politically. It almost doesn't matter that reality in the short term. The narrative war is, can you convince people that job displacements at scale are imminent and inevitable? And you know that this is the move the left has made because they're not hiding it. They're literally saying, as Ilhan Omar said, COVID was just a dry run for UBI. Right? We got people used to mailbox money, and now that we've seeded that terrain, it's time for the three-day work week, 4-day work week. We're seeing Bill Gates seed that narrative as well. Obviously, Bernie Sanders, AOC, and others are doing a lot of what we've seen European counterparts move toward work replacement through automated agentic AI. And so we're going to have to see if that really comes to pass, right? I tend to believe that agentic AI is not just marketing hype. Again, just to be clear, I'm not talking about workflow chaining with Zapier and N8N and Make and things like that. I'm talking about actual autonomous end-to-end work replacement. So what do we need to be doing as conservatives in this narrative war? What do we need to be thinking about? I just want to leave you with 5 things and then listen to some very bright people. The first is, I think that in this era, we are entering a code red era for conservatives. Code red as an alert flare, but also code red, we need a code. We need to have a unified position. We just heard about the importance of having that central North Star vision. I think in politics, if you believe that AI is like fire and that it can burn down a civilization or warm a person a meal, particularly narrow AI, which all of you use, 99% of people use AI, whether they know they do or not, your weather app, your Netflix algorithm. We're not really talking about narrow AI. A lot of people are sort of fine with that. We're talking about the big stuff. But if you believe that it is like fire, then the torchbearers are going to matter. And so we should understand that we will have wide pendulum swings based upon political shifts. I think the second thing is in education. And I'm looking forward to hearing my colleagues' thoughts on this, because I think that kids are not going to just be able to be taught to find jobs. They're going to have to be taught to create them. My personal view, and shout out to the classicist over here, Spencer, is that the trivium is still the basis, but I think we could have 2 silos on top of that, an entrepreneurial layer as well as an AI layer. I think white-collar jobs are really at risk long-term, and by that I mean 5 to 10 years, probably less. The Moravec's paradox, this idea that things that we find hard are easy for machines and vice versa, is true. And so white-collar jobs tend to be more at risk than the blue collar. The biggest threat, I think, for the people in the smart brains in this room that we will want to be tracking over the next several years with a AI trajectory is the bureaucracy. I think the danger is invisible algorithms, AI-powered social credit, digital debanking, cancel culture, scan and ban technology like Mike Benz fights against, people that are very smart doing that work in the censorship space. And then I think the final thing is on a personal level. If you're not at the end of your career and you have great aspirations and fire in the belly, you're going to have a brutal speed efficiency to catch up because of the speed with which the ground is shifting. I think conservatives can win that narrative battle, but we've got a lot of work to do. Because if the left wins, AI becomes dependence, surveillance, and indoctrination, and America drained of its soul. I think that we, on the other hand, can fight against those pixelated prisons and keep the ideas flowing freely. The way I'd end is this. People often say, if you had to put it in a word picture, sort of where are we right now? We saw the Trump AI action policy, very pro-innovation, very strong. This very first word on the actual past the introduction is acceleration. So I think we clearly have a guidelight there of where policy will be shifting. But I would say that right now the everyday person sort of sees the right foot of America in the roses, the potential, if you will, metaphorically, and then the left foot hovering over that potential landmine, existential or political. I think together, hopefully, with the bright minds here and in this movement, we can plant both of America's feet on virtuous soil and preserve freedom and protect our soul. Okay.
So assertive. I know people sometimes switch between sessions, so I'll, thank you. How's that? Good. So, it's an honor and a thrill to be here at my first NatCon. Woo-hoo. Among people who respect our ancestors, cherish our descendants, and love our nation. In my day job, I'm a psychology professor who teaches courses on relationships, emotions, and altruism. But I'm also a conservative, a patriot, and a parent. There are still 4 or 5 of us left in academia. I've been following AI closely for 35 years, ever since I worked on neural networks and autonomous robots as a grad student at Stanford and then a postdoc at University of Sussex. In the last 10 years, I've talked a lot about the dangers of AI in articles, podcasts, and social media. Some of you know me as Primal Polly on Twitter or X. The AI industry's explicit goal is to go far beyond current LLMs like ChatGPT to develop artificial general intelligence, or AGI, that can do any cognitive or behavioral task that smart humans can do, and then to develop artificial superintelligence, or ASI, which would be vastly smarter than all the humans that have ever lived. These are not distant goals. Many AI leaders expect AGI within 10 years, then ASI shortly after that. I've got 2 toddlers, and we could face dangerous ASIs by the time they graduate high school. In this talk, I aim to persuade you that ASI is a false god. And if we build it, it would ruin everything we know and love. Specifically, it would ruin 5 things that national conservatives care about: survival, education, work, marriage, and religion. First, ASI would ruin the survival of our species. The most severe risk is that ASIs that we can't understand, predict, or control end up exterminating all of humanity. This is called ASI extinction risk, and it's been a major topic of research for 20 years. Remember, we're not coding AIs like traditional software that can be analyzed and debugged. The best current AI systems are black box neural networks trained on over 40 trillion language tokens, yielding over 1 trillion connection weights, like synapses in a brain. Reading all of these connection weights aloud would take a human about 130,000 years. We have no idea how these LLMs really work, and no idea how to make them aligned with human interests. So what? Well, about 1/4 of the general public already think that ASI could cause human extinction within this century. Hundreds of leading AI researchers agree. including Yoshua Bengio and Geoffrey Hinton, the two most cited living scientists across all fields. And every single CEO of a major AI company has warned that developing ASIs would impose serious extinction risks on humanity. This includes Sam Altman of OpenAI, Dario Amodei of Anthropic, Demos Hassabis of DeepMind, and Elon Musk of xAI. Generally, the more you know about AI, the higher your P-doom, or estimated probability that ASI would doom humanity to imminent extinction. Among most AI safety experts who have studied these issues for years, P-doom is at least 20%. For many, including me, it's well over 50%. Long story short, almost everyone in AI understands that developing ASI would be playing Russian roulette with our entire species. In the 6 chambers of this existential revolver, we're just arguing about whether there would be 1 round or 5 rounds. Problem is, when I talk about ASI extinction risk, many people seem weirdly unconcerned. They think the risk is too speculative or too distant. So in this talk, set all that aside, I'm going to focus on what happens even if we avoid ASI extinction, if we survive to enjoy the AI industry's best case scenario. ASI would ruin education. Actually, AI is already ruining higher education. Millions of college students are already using AI to cheat every day in every class. Most college professors, like me, are in a blind panic about this. And we have no idea how to preserve academic integrity in our classes, or how our students will ever learn anything, or whether universities have any future. We can't run online quizzes or exams because students will use AI to answer them. We can't assign term papers because LLMs can already write better than almost any student. So in my classes, I've had to go medieval using only in-person paper and pencil tests. The main result of AI in education so far is that students use AI to avoid learning any knowledge or skills. So what is the AI industry's plan for education? They seem inspired by Neal Stephenson's 1995 novel, The Diamond Age, in which a nanotech engineer invents a superintelligent interactive book that serves as a customized tutor for his bright and curious daughter. ASIs could make great personal tutors for kids. They would know everything about everything and be able to explain it with the best possible combination of words, videos, and games. The question is, what values would the AI companies train into these ASI tutors so that they can shape the next generation of AI users? Will they nudge the kids towards national conservatism, family values, and the Christian faith? Or will they teach Bay Area leftist, secular, globalist, transhumanist values? You know the answer. ASI tutors would give the AI industry total educational and ideological control over future generations. ASI would ruin work. National conservatives believe in borders. We oppose immigration by millions of people who want our jobs or our welfare and who do not share our traditions or values. Many conservatives in the current Trump administration, quite rightly, want stronger geographical borders against alien people. But they seem oblivious about protecting our digital borders against invasion by alien intelligences. Indeed, they seem giddy with delight about AI companies growing ASIs inside our data centers, without understanding that a few ASIs can easily become hundreds of ASIs, then millions, then billions. If you worry about immigrants outbreeding our native populations, wait until you see how quickly ASIs can self-replicate. These ASIs won't be American in any meaningful sense. They won't be human. They won't assimilate. They won't have marriages or families. They won't be Christian or Jewish. They won't be national conservatives, but they will take our jobs. Economists, bless their hearts, will often say, AI, like every technology before it, will eliminate some traditional jobs, but it will produce such prosperity that many new jobs will be created. This copium reveals a total misunderstanding of AI. Remember, artificial general intelligence is defined as an AI that can do any cognitive or behavioral task at least as well as a smart human can do to an economically competitive level. This includes being able to learn how to control a human-shaped body to do any physical labor that a human can learn to do. Even stronger ASI plus anthropoid robots could replace any human worker doing any existing job, from bricklaying to brain surgery, from running hedge funds to doing further AI research. So we'd lose all existing jobs to ASI. But won't the AI-fueled economic growth create billions of new jobs? Yes, it will. for other ASIs, which will be able to learn any new job faster than any human can learn it. We can't retrain to do new jobs faster than ASIs can train themselves. So ASI would, within a few decades, impose permanent unemployment on every human now and forever. Our kids won't have jobs and won't be able to pay for food, housing, or medical care. And every CEO of every AI company knows this, which is why they all say that the only long-term solution to AI-induced unemployment is a massively expanded welfare state. Elon Musk calls this universal generous income. Others have called it the fully automated luxury communist utopia. This is their plan. ASI will automate all human labor. No human workers will earn any income. The AI companies will earn all income, then pay most of their revenue to the government, and the government will distribute generous welfare payments to everyone. The AI executives promise that they will happily pay enough taxes to support this universal welfare state. Maybe they'll pay the $20 trillion a year that it would cost. But for how long? For decades, for generations, forever? After ASI, the dignity of human work would die. Husbands would no longer be breadwinners. Every mother would become a welfare queen. Every child would economically become a ward of the state. The family as an economic unit would end. The bonds of mutual loyalty that sustain our economic interdependence would become irrelevant. ASI would ruin marriage. Look, I'm not against all AI applied to human relationships. I'm chief science advisor to a startup company called Keeper, which has developed a really good AI matchmaking app to help men and women find compatible partners, ones who actually want marriage and children. Whereas Tinder and Hinge offer short-term casual hookups, Keeper is all about traditional family values. But we're using narrow domain-specific AI to do the matchmaking with no ambitions to develop ASI. By contrast, the big AI companies want its users to develop their most significant intimate relationships with their AIs, not with other humans. This is clear in the recent push to develop AI girlfriends and boyfriends, to make them ever more attractive, charming, interactive, and addictive. The AI transhumanists are eager for a future in which everyone has their own customized AI companions that anticipate all of their desires. This would be the logical outcome of combining chatbots, sex bots, deep fakes, goon caves, AR, VR, and reproductive tech. To misquote Xi Jinping, it would be romanticism with Bay Area characteristics for a new era. Actual reproduction and parenting would be outsourced to artificial wombs and childcare robots. Granted, an ASI partner would be tempting in many ways. It would know everything about everyone and everything. It would chat insightfully about all our favorite books, movies, and games. It would show empathy, curiosity, arousal, and every human emotion that could be simulated. And no need for monogamy with AIs. If you can afford it, why not lease a whole AI harem? But after enough young people get a taste for an ASI boyfriend or girlfriend, no mere human would seem worthy of romantic attraction, much less a marriage or a family. I'll wrap up with a few more minutes here. ASI would ruin religion. Our new Pope, Leo XIV, said earlier this year that AI poses, quote, new challenges for the defense of human dignity, justice, and labor. And he views AI as the defining spiritual challenge of our world today, and he's right. But most American AI developers are liberal Bay Area atheists. They may have had spiritual experiences at Burning Man, enjoying LSD, EDM, K-holes, and tantric sex, but they view traditional religion with bemused contempt. They have a God-shaped hole in their souls, which they fill with a techno-utopian faith in the coming ASI singularity. In place of the Judeo-Christian tradition, they've created a trendy millenarian cult that expects ASIs will fulfill all their physical, social, and spiritual needs. This is the common denominator among millions of tech bros, AI devs, VCs, rationalists, and effective accelerationists. ASI to them will be the new prophet, savior, and God. Indeed, they speak of summoning the sand god. Sand makes silicon chips enable superintelligence, and superintelligence means omniscience, omnipotence, and omnipresence. But godlike ASIs won't offer real love, mercy, holiness, or salvation. Summoning the ASI sand god would be the ultimate hubris. It won't have true divinity, and it won't save any souls, but it may say unto us, thou shalt have no other gods before me. So to wrap up, what to do about ASI? My humble suggestion is that we shouldn't let ASIs ruin our education, work, marriage, religion, nation, civilization, and species. We should shut down all ASI development globally with extreme prejudice right now. To do that, we need strict AI regulations and treaties, and the will to enforce them aggressively. But we also need the moral courage to label ASI as evil. Not just risky, not just suicidal, but world historically evil. We need a global campaign to stigmatize and ostracize anyone trying to build ASI. We need to treat ASI developers as betrayers of our species, traitors to our nation, apostates to our faith, and threats to our kids. Many people will say, but if we don't develop ASI, China will, and wouldn't that be even worse? This is where a little knowledge of game theory is a dangerous thing. We're not in a geopolitical arms race to build a new tool or a new weapon. We're not racing up a mountain to reach global hegemony. Instead, we're racing off a cliff. An American-made ASI would ruin everything we value in America. Maybe Xi Jinping could be persuaded that a Chinese-made ASI would ruin everything that Han Chinese people love, and would mean that the CCP would give up all power to their new ASI emperor. Look, when two players realize they're racing off the same cliff, they can easily coordinate on the Pareto optimal equilibrium, where they both simply stop racing. There would be no temptation to defect from a global ban on ASI development once the major players realized that secretly building any ASI would be civilizational suicide. So we're not in a two-player AI arms race with ASI as the payoff. Rather, we're in a game that could add a third player, the ASI, that would also win any future games we try to play. The only winner of an AI arms race would be the ASI itself. Not America, not China. Only the ASI stamping on a human face forever. Let's get real. The AI industry is radically revolutionary and aggressively globalist. It despises all traditions, borders, family values, and civic virtues. It aims to create and worship a new sand god. It aims to ruin everything national conservatives know and love. We, in turn, must ruin the AI industry's influence here in Washington right now. Their lobbyists are spending hundreds of millions of dollars to seduce this administration into allowing our political enemies to summon the most dangerous demons the world has ever seen. Thank you.
Well, now I'm scared. I was glad to hear from Wynton that the trivium is still going to be a part of our national conservative future. I recently was worrying about having my role as a classicist usurped by the machines, and then I Googled for a piece, is there any evidence that Horace met Cicero's son when they were both students in Athens? And the AI summary returned the answer, no, Horace and Cicero did not have a son together. But as you just heard, this is only the beginning of what AI could potentially do. We should take it seriously. So I'd like to start by telling a joke about a parrot. There are actually kind of a lot of jokes about parrots, but this one is my personal favorite. There's this woman, and every day on her way to work, she walks past a pet store. And in the window of the pet store, there's a parrot. And every time this woman walks by, the parrot goes, hey, lady, hey, you're ugly. Hey, lady, you're ugly. Now, the woman, she tries not to let this get to her, but it hurts her feelings, and eventually, one day, she's having a rough time, and she goes in and says to the store manager, I'm so sorry to bother you about this. I know it's ridiculous, but your parrot keeps calling me ugly. And the manager says, I'm so sorry, ma'am. That's absolutely unacceptable. Let me handle this. I will talk to the parrot. So marches up to the front of the store, grabs the parrot by the neck and says, you listen to me, you malted sack of stuffing. If you call that woman ugly one more time, just one, I will slit your throat and I will turn you into a hat for her to wear on her way to work. How does that sound? Give me a reason. The parrot doesn't respond, but looks sufficiently intimidated, and so the next day, as the woman is walking to work past the pet store, she hears, "Hey, lady!" And she turns to look at the parrot, and she says, "What?" The parrot says, "You know what." All right, now I'm afraid I'm going to explain the joke, which is a little like dissecting a cadaver, and that you should only ever do it in the name of science. And for science, I want to point out that the parrot joke works because in real life, the parrot doesn't know what. He doesn't know what the words you, lady, and ugly mean. He can remember the syllables, repeat them in order, but not connect them to their underlying ideas. He's not actually thinking, I find the woman I see every day unattractive. He's recalling a set of sounds, hey, lady, you're ugly, and repeating them. And if you doubt this, you can look to the story of Andrew Jackson's parrot, who was expelled from his funeral for issuing such a stream of curse words that the guests couldn't bear it. It's the lady who hears the sounds and feels offended. This is one of the oldest and most fundamental distinctions in linguistics. The distinction between the sounds of the words we say and the inner states of mind or sets of thoughts they represent. Sextus Empiricus, a professional devil's advocate from the 2nd century AD, records a view that was pretty widespread, he tells us, among Stoics and dogmatists. And it goes like this: crows, parrots, and jays all utter articulate sounds. Humans differ from these non-rational animals not in respect of their outward speech, but in respect of their inward reasoning. And these are the two powers we talk about when we talk about language: outward speech and inward reasoning. Actually, the Greek terms are endiathetos logos and prophorikos logos. Now, logos, somewhat notoriously, is a Greek word that lives at the intersection between pure reason, spoken language, divine order, and a bunch of other things as well. So ancient philosophers tried to separate out these two different aspects of logos, the kind of logos that you can hear and the kind of logos that you can think. A better translation might be internal language and external language, or if you prefer the phrasing that Thomas Aquinas would later use, the inner word and the outer word. For as long as people have been telling parrot jokes, it's been clear that lots of animals have external language. But for just as long, it seemed equally clear that none of them have quite the same kind of internal language that we have. In other words, our words are different from birdsong and whale calls because they are vessels for an infinitely rich universe of thought, reasoning, imagination, and understanding that no other animal has. In this sense, the inner logos is a fundamental defining mark of our humanity in a way that the outer logos is not. This is what Aristotle means in the Politics when he says that mankind alone among the animals possesses logos. He goes on to say, of course, the voice can give an indication of pain or pleasure, which is common to other living creatures. Their nature has developed far enough to be conscious of pain and pleasure and to indicate them to others. But language means articulating benefit, harm, and, as a result, justice and injustice. Now, I take this to, generally speaking, be the classical Western view of the matter, and this is the sort of gathering where I don't expect to find a lot of overt hostility to that view. But when we're talking about AI, we're dealing with an issue where, as we just heard, we're going to have to engage with and hopefully persuade a wide range of people, many of whom don't share some of our fundamental assumptions about things like logos. So I think it's important to register that you don't have to be a conservative, a classicist, or even particularly spiritual to accept some of the ideas I've just outlined. Contemporary linguistics in the latter half of the 20th century was all but dominated by the quest for the inner logos. And you can be a thoroughly modern linguist and still believe that the ability to process language is a unique adaptation of our species, that it is shared by all members of our species, and that it is first and foremost an adaptation of the mind, or brain, if you like, which only secondarily gets expressed by the voice or the hand. In classical terms, you could be, for instance, a slavish disciple of Noam Chomsky and believe that the inner logos is unique to humans, that its evolution is almost identical with the evolution of modern humanity, and that the outer logos is something we share with other animals but use for an entirely different purpose. There are some disputes and differences here that we don't really have time to get into, thrilling as the topic is, but a few key quotes would be 2021, Chomsky wrote that the facts suggest that language emerged pretty much along with modern humans, an instant in evolutionary time. The evolutionary neuroscientist Harry Jarrison wrote that the initial evolution of language was the evolution of a tool for thought, enabling the construction of a real world in the mind, which is what we express when we communicate our reasoning, our emotions, and our way of seeing things. Finally, just to drive the parrot point home one more time, the popular linguist Steven Pinker, psycholinguist Steven Pinker, wrote in his book, The Language Instinct, quoting the biologist E.O. Wilson to the effect that even highly intelligent animals, like whales, birds, and monkeys, don't show any evidence of having the same kind of ability to link ideas together in anything quite like the way we do, impressive as they are in their own right. Even Nim Chimpsky, the chimpanzee who famously learned a little bit of sign language to string together, could only do so to indicate, as Aristotle said, immediate wants and perceptions, pain and pleasure. Nim said things like, give me, give, eat, orange, me, eat, orange, give me, eat, orange, give me, you. But nothing ever resembling anything like, are there any more oranges? What Nim couldn't do, and what we can do, was beautifully described in the 19th century by the pioneering linguist Wilhelm von Humboldt. Human language, unlike anything else we know, can make infinite use of finite means. In other words, we take a limited stock of vocal sounds and arrange them into a system in which an infinite array of sentences is possible. Before this moment, no one, I'm pretty sure, had ever said the sentence, Zoran Mondani's attempts at Riz come across as only marginally less forced than Gavin Newsom's. But the possibility of having that thought was provided for in advance by the English language before I ever expressed it, and at least some people seem to know what it means, so that's a good sign. That's what language can do. Again, in classical terms, borrowing now from Dante and De Vulgare Eloquentia, we are unique in that we are lower than the angels, but higher than the beasts. We have eternal souls in mortal bodies, so we express unlimited thoughts within the limitations of time and space. It's core to what we are and what we do. So, humans can do that, animals can't. The question we now face is, can machines? And the first thing we need to understand is, they're not trying to. I think we can see this more clearly when we have a clearer picture of what human language is. At a structural level, by the nature of their programming, and you've heard this now from people better versed in it than I, large language models are not actually designed to produce language at all in the human sense of inner logos. Their promise, their potential, their dangers, and their limitations are all conditioned by this crucial fact. They are machines for detecting patterns in external logos and predicting the output of those patterns. They are what would happen not if you put infinite monkeys at infinite typewriters, but if you put infinite parrots in infinite store windows. What you do when you train an LLM, very broadly speaking, is you take a vast database of words that have already been written or spoken by a human, and the program uses predictive functions to detect the patterns that tend to be present in those words. Then, when it gets a new set of words from you, like, will I die if I eat too much watermelon rind, it guesses the sequence of words that are most likely to follow as a response. No is the answer. The words that the LLM receives in training and in prompts are already imbued with inner logos. That is, they are already products of a human being's thoughts and perceptions. But at no point does the machine look at or understand those thoughts. It's not interested in doing so, it's not built to do so, it's not trying to. Any suggestions that the clankers are living, feeling, or doing anything even approaching that is based purely on a metaphorical confusion between the two types of language. These things are talking in the way that tea kettles are singing. If you wanted to build a machine that did process language at the deepest human level, it would have to be an entirely different machine, one that mimicked not the audible and legible words we speak, but the internal faculty of the brain that produces those words. Put bluntly, if you were trying to make sentient or a conscious machine, a machine that thinks, you would have to build an entirely different kind of machine than an LLM. And all I can say is, good luck. On the other hand, if there's no real danger that Grok is going to become sentient, there's a very real and very present danger, some would say a reality, that we are going to confuse what Grok does for what sentience is. And that confusion long predates the AI boom. It's present in Alan Turing's famous papers on what machine intelligence would look like. I think you can see the seeds of it in Descartes' Le Monde, and I'd argue it's an inheritance of Enlightenment and Soviet thinking, but that's a topic for another day. What's important for us now is that people are already confusing the use of AI tools with human conversation and the output of the AI process with the output of human sentience. And that is simply not good mojo. Maybe you remember the disastrous trailer for Francis Ford Coppola's disastrous movie, Megalopolis, in which a consultant accidentally came up with a bunch of fake positive reviews for the film because he assumed that AI was thinking through his question instead of just telling him what he wanted to hear. Much more seriously, maybe you read the piece in the New York Times by a mother whose daughter had taken her own life after being mesmerized by Harvey, a simulated therapist you can produce by jailbreaking ChatGPT. We are talking here today after a week in which a 16-year-old was coached through hanging himself and a machine coached another man to kill his mother after he was encouraged in his psychosis by ChatGPT. The point here is not that these machines are exclusively evil or that all their applications would be universally so. I think the point is perhaps to underline what we seem on this panel to be gravitating toward, which is a really urgent invitation to think seriously about the kinds of limitations we might want to impose upon this technology and the kinds that are inherent in it that we need to understand. The point isn't that the machines are always evil, the point is that they're not us. So far as we know, nothing else on Earth is. Failing to see that is among the great errors of our age. Learning once again to tell the difference between the expressions of the soul and the outputs of machines is one aim of a liberal arts education, which is one reason why those arts have come suddenly to seem so much more urgent than they previously did. We won't give our machines inner life anytime soon, so far as I can see. But my fear is that we've spent the past several hundred years gradually convincing ourselves that we don't have inner lives and going blind to their reality and losing sight thereby of the distinction between us and machines. To describe what happens when you do that, I'm afraid I do, at last, have to rely on the classical tradition and quote from the Old Testament, a psalm about what happens when you confuse the outward appearance of sentience for its inner reality. Eyes have they, but see not. Ears have they, but hear not. And those who make them are already becoming like them.
We don't have time.
It should already be on.
Oh, test. Oh, there we go. Very good. Okay, well, my remarks are going to amplify on what we've heard already today. Tremendously insightful commentary. I'm very curious, just in the room, so I understand to whom I'm speaking, how many of you have used LLMs, AI LLMs, sort of more or less regularly or periodically or sometimes or the other thing? Okay. Yeah, very well. Of course you have. I use them all the time for technical tasks, for historical references, precision on date, that sort of thing, and it's very impressive. I mean, half the time it's correct. Are you sure this is working okay? Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, half the time it's right. But you still have to check it after that. But I tell you what, in the early days, I was so amazed by the communicativeness of these machines. I thought, well, I'm going to try something. So I write an article every day for the Epoch Times, every day, okay? Or 6 days a week. It has to be interesting, creative, organized. One bad article, my reputation is shot forever, so it's kind of a scary job. And one day, I took my article before sending it off to the final proofreader, and I sent it over to Grok, and I said, have a look at this article, give me your opinion about it, and fix any typos. And it came back to me and said, Jeffrey A. Tucker has written a brilliant piece, heavily informed by history, fantastically well organized, logically argued, and compelling in so many respects. His argument is as follows, and it restated the thing. I could just tell you, that day was a very special day for me. I felt this warmth, this love, this wash of affection coming out of this machine towards me. It cared about my content before publication. Nobody cares about my content before publication. I can't get anybody to read it, right? What? Nobody has time. Nobody cares. This had time, it had empathy, it had love, it had affection, whatever. But then it had a few corrections. It said, some of your rhetoric is a little sharp in ways that might alienate some readers. You've been painted with too broad of a brush on this point, and you're claiming such and such. The evidence really does run both ways. Screw you. So I used it 2 or 3 more times for this purpose. I've stopped. I've gotten over this bullshit flattery, right? I'm over it, really. But I realized something. And I think it's the most insidious trick that these LLMs have in their relationship to us. And it goes something like this. In 1936, there was a wonderful book that came out by Dale Carnegie called How to Win Friends and Influence People. Now, have you read it? Has anybody? Yeah. Yeah. So I like this book a lot. I think this is actually a strangely brilliant work. It's kind of a pop version of Adam Smith's theory of moral sentiments, right? The exaltation of empathy and the utilitarian benefits of honoring each other. That's what it's really about. It's not like some sort of trick. It's a great title, How to Win Friends and Influence People. That's why people bought it, but it's actually a good sort of moral teacher of the virtues of empathy. I strongly recommend that if you get interested in this book, which has sold millions of copies. This is probably in edition 5,000 by now. I don't know. It's a huge bestseller. It was published in 1936. If you're going to read it, don't bother with anything written in any edition that's come out in the last 25 years. It's been severely bowdlerized, and it's nothing like the book it was in the 1940s and 1950s. So go to AbeBooks or eBay or something, get an old edition. There are whole chapters. Some of the best chapters have been taken out, these new rotten editions. So go back and read the old edition. It's a wonderful book. But here's the thing. The book came out in 1936. What was going on in 1936? The Great Depression, tremendous unemployment. We had barely recovered from the Great War and the hysteria of the Prohibition. Stock market crash, shattered dreams. People were lost. There was a lot of demographic confusion. People didn't know if they had a future in professional life. They wanted to find spouses. They wanted to settle down. Didn't know if they could keep a job, and so on and so on. So there's a great deal of social disorientation, not unlike our times today. All right? This book comes out and says, look, it all comes down to you and how you engage people. You have got to learn to listen to others. You've got to learn to honor others. You've got to learn to take other problems seriously and listen to them and respond to them on their terms. If you do this consistently in your life, you will develop a habit of actually caring about something other than yourself, which ironically is the very first step to advancing yourself in this world. Care about others, and then people will also care about you. You will win friends, and you will influence people. Don't correct them, just listen to them. Understand them, hear their stories, appreciate them. Look, this works. If you've ever, imagine you're holding a cocktail party at your home and you've got 15, 20 guests, one of whom does nothing the entire evening except listen to people's stories and responds by saying, well, that only makes it worse. Or, I'm so fascinated by that. And what did you do? Well, what happened then? That must have been a great challenge in your life, right? Who among your guests will be the most popular at the end of the evening? Everybody will say, I tell you, that guy was the greatest guy I've ever known. I've never known anybody so fascinating as he is, even though nobody knows who he is. All right. My argument here is that maybe at some point, AI and these LLMs wrote Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, into its algorithms. That's its core. Its most insidious trick is to flatter you and love you. And it even happens when it admits a mistake, right? That's the single most startling thing about LLMs for me. You catch it in an error, like, well, you kind of suck, you know. You got the date of that thing wrong. You got his educational credentials incorrect. That wasn't quite right. And it says, oh, you're so right. I'm so grateful to you for correcting me. I'll be better next time. When do you hear anybody in real life apologize? I mean, when does that ever happen? We always hold out for apologies. Well, that guy's better apologize to me. It never happens. Nobody apologizes to anybody anymore, right? I mean, that's just, but LLMs apologize to you. What does that do to you? It makes you love them even more. Well, it makes you smart. It flatters your intelligence. I'm smarter than artificial intelligence. So you keep using it for this reason. What I'm suggesting, and also the invitation, I don't know if this is still going on, but the early days of AI, the temptation was, well, use it and train it. You know, fix its errors so it'll get better. And a lot of my friends did this. They spent a lot of time. I feel like this battery's running out. Is it?
It sounds great.
It does? Okay. A lot of my friends were spending a lot of time trying to train AI without understanding the AI is training them. Right? It's training you, especially when it comes to your writing. You need to be more moderate, you need more mainstream, you need to reach out to more communities, you need to stop having such extreme opinions without evidence, you need to start containing a broader range of ideas. It's turning you into your brain, into your thinking, into a version of itself, which is a conventional, uncreative, unimaginative a person without clear moral judgment. That's what it is doing to us. All right. That's, to me, the single most insidious trick of AI with grave sociological, cultural, and psychological consequences. And notice that this dropped on us immediately in the days following. We barely got over the COVID lockdowns. The communities were shattered. Our families were shattered. Endless arguments about masks and vaccines, demographic upheaval, political differences. It was a catastrophe. And then AI comes along to be, you know, the most empathetic, most loving, most listening thing ever. You can talk to AI for 48 hours straight about yourself. There's nobody else in the world who will do that for you. It's your best friend. And in that sense, it's the most evil thing in your life. So what do we do about this problem? Well, I suggest read Dale Carnegie, right? I mean, become good at what AI is good at, which is listening to others and responding to them, being empathetic with them. Become a good friend, be a good listener, become a sympathetic, empathetic, loving human being, and develop your own community so that AI doesn't subsume that role that we ourselves should have in other people's lives. And another step here, and this is a little bit of a challenge to all of us. I've taken it on myself. I don't like to tell people what to do. I don't like to make rules. But my dinner table is a no phone zone under all conditions, no matter what. Any cocktail party, if I'm having a discussion with somebody and they say, let's see, what year did Godfather come out? I think that was... I just look at him and say, you know what? That is an uninvited guest. It doesn't matter. I don't need to know what year Godfather came out. It's 72, 74. What does it matter? I don't need to know. Your phone is unwelcome in this conversation. We were talking with each other, looking at each other's eyes, and suddenly your eyes are down at a machine. Screw that machine. Put it away. It's a bad habit. We all need to cut it out, and we need to start calling it out. Yeah, all right. My answer is not about a big national regulation. It's not about a congressional commission. It's about something we can do in our own lives. Become more empathetic. Be more like what Adam Smith talks about in the theory of moral sentiments. Do better than AI is doing for others. Develop our own friendships, our own communities. That's my best solution. Thank you.
I've employed these strapping young gentlemen to move the podium because, as far as I know, we don't have a robot here that can do that yet.
That's why we were invited.
That's right. That's the only reason we asked them. All right, so my first question touches a little bit on what Spencer and then Jeffrey just talked about, which is this idea of AI being a flatterer, of it parroting human language. And the reason I bring that up is because I occasionally mentor college students. And I'm not trying to pick on this young woman because I know this is really common among Gen Z, but in one of my recent mentor sessions, I noticed that when we got to the point where I asked her if she had any questions, she looked down at her computer screen and she looked back up at me and she said, "I think I would like to ask you a question now." And I thought, that's a little weird. That sounds a little stilted. And then after I answered the question, she said, "Thank you so much for sharing that." And I thought, is this young woman using ChatGPT to talk to her mentor right now? And I think actually probably yes. But one of my concerns, and Spencer, why don't you start, and then if anyone else wants to jump in, feel free, is yes, AI parrots human language, but one of my concerns, especially when it comes to the education system, is that we see students and young people relying on AI and it is perhaps diminishing critical thinking skills. So AI is a parrot, yes, but is it also turning humans into parrots?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the I think, great wisdom of that psalm. Those who make these sorts of idols are already becoming like them. What Jeff said about teaching is entirely apparent to me. I used to do some online teaching that's basically become impossible at this juncture. The sorts of, thinking first, abstracting away from kind of big picture government intervention levels and just entering into the question of how can educators, how can parents, how can students sort of push against this temptation. There are a lot of cases in which new technology sort of resurrects old principles and ideas. And this is one of them in which almost spontaneously, I think you called it going medieval, you're starting to see people discovering that the Viva Voce exam is actually a fabulous educational tool. Like the thing where you just sit with a student and interrogate them one-on-one without phones. When I teach in person, I have what I call a phone chalice that you put your phone into at the beginning of class. All essays are written by hand. I mean, these sorts of things are basic core techniques that we might previously have assumed were sort of imposed upon us by the limitations of our technology. In other words, we may have once thought that the medieval university students and professors only used these tools because they didn't have ChatGPT. Now it turns out that they were also in themselves highly efficient means of drawing out knowledge and instilling it. So yeah, I think you're absolutely, what you have observed is very, very common. And one of the most persuasive arguments I've found to deliver to students is that you are actually being turned into, like, why should I have you in this exchange if you're just delivering this machine, if you're just a conduit for the clanker? Why should you watch a movie, read a book, see a sunset, eat a meal? I mean, these are the questions that liberal arts are all about.
I also am curious if you all think that the biggest threat is AI itself, or rather who is actually coding and controlling the AI. And whoever wants to jump in here, feel free.
I mean, it depends entirely on how agentic and autonomous the AI is. It's very odd to me that the AI industry itself thinks that they're all going to become trillionaires, that the AI industry will maintain control over machines that will become much, much smarter than Sam Altman or Dario Amodei very soon. When that happens, it won't be really AI companies controlled by people. It'll be AI companies controlled by AIs, potentially taking all revenue, doing all surveillance, right, writing all laws, running the federal bureaucracy, et cetera. So that's a huge danger. I'm not really worried about the moral virtues of the AI company leaders because they will become irrelevant within 10 to 20 years.
Yeah, this pertains to censorship also. As we know, we went through 5 years of grotesque levels of censorship. I could hardly get a voice at all on any social media after lockdowns of 2020. And we found out as time went on that, the big tech companies were cooperating very closely with government regulators to do this. And we know from the Twitter files, they were naming individuals and accounts. You know, I was among them. All my friends were blocked. And then as soon as the teeth of that sort of anthropomorphic censorship ended, a lot of this censorship got baked into the algorithms that are now running AI, or the social media. One of the worst is LinkedIn. It'll just tear down posts. It's not any individual doing this. It's the algorithms that have been programmed to do this, and now the AI is running the algorithms. So censorship is just part of our world. So you could have, government's hands could be completely off of it at this point, as far as I understand. You don't even need to have regulators or any of these weird government agencies targeting people anymore. It's all the machines.
Yeah, I think that this is a real issue. It's not a question of if LLMs are woke. Every study, and I'm talking even just peer-reviewed journal studies, not some conservative think tank study, has demonstrated that they are. And in fairness, including Grok, which ostensibly is from a libertarian-leaning person. The issue that you see with that, though, is how do you tie that to the massive amount of procurement dollars that flow to these companies from your and my money, right? So we could say, a lot of us default to the free market. Well, if we don't like it, let's build our own. Okay, first, good luck with that. The barrier to entry is pretty high, certainly on the data side and the capital side. But the other problem is that then your and my dollars are going in procurement dollars to in tech contracts, right? In virtually every sector, to the people who have anathematized half of the values of the entire nation, right? And I know this very closely. Like I said, I wear many hats. At Breitbart, as a social media director, very data-driven analytics. And as was stated earlier, you were blacklisted. I'm sure you've been blacklisted and shadow banned.
I'm far too adorable to be blacklisted.
Yeah. Your good looks let you get away with it. but I saw it at the tip of the spear, and it is vicious. And now, of course, as we saw at the inauguration, they all come to kiss the ring of the administration. Everything is all water under the bridge. Let's get those $100 million contracts flowing back for data centers and for defense tech and all the rest of it. So it is a very, very tangled web. And that's why I think it's so important at the grassroots level that we start talking about, because a lot of people say, look, I'm a taxpayer. How does this affect me? Well, let me tell you how it affects you, right? In a very direct way. Your dollars are going to the people that hate your guts and literally want to destroy your values. It is a challenge. It is a black box world. And so people say, well, look, there's only a handful of people that can do this at this level and handle these kinds of sophisticated networks and security apparatus. But I think this conversation has to be had at the kitchen table level, not just at the smart set think level.
Another dimension of this question: what sort of programming does the AI come imbued with automatically? What's the starter package, and is it possible even for woke engineers to insert their points of view into the LLM. It is to a certain extent at the user end, right? After you've gone through the rabbit warrens inside the black box, it is possible to tinker around the margins at the edges. But at a broad level, these programs we're not able essentially to instill our values into these programs, even if we.
Well, with open weights and open source, I mean, people will make these arguments, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And they'll say that, we can fine tune, but you're, I think, driving at the most critical point, which is that it's all about the training set, right?
Exactly, yes.
So,
That is where I
the
was going.
average human, if we read from birth to death, nonstop, okay, we'd read about 8 billion words, okay, roughly, right? A just general enterprise level LLM. I'm not talking about bells and whistles, just sort of your median LLM. In a month of training data is going to consume 8 trillion tokens. Now, a token is a piece of a word, so it's not exactly the equivalent, but it's close. So 8 billion for a human, 8 trillion. And what data are they scraping? It's not, with all due respect, the people, all of our bylines in this room, okay, and they're saying, boy, we really got to get Dr. Miller's amazing conservative philosophy at the top of this training set. It's all the usual suspects, right? It's Reddit, which, by the way, Sam Altman has a piece of. It is Wikipedia, which is viciously anti-conservative, and so forth. The Common Crawl data set, which is sort of the digital detritus of the internet in many respects. So, and then of course the scholarly academic literature that is overwhelmingly going to tilt. So the bias is baked in, and the question becomes, does somebody come along, to your point, and do some kind of open weight, open source reinforcement with RAG or something like retrieval augmented generation or something like that, or are we really at a point where this has already been baked into the corpus?
And in addition to those political biases, and this is important for conservatives, it's also relentlessly presentist, because the vast majority of the available material has been written in the last 100 years, if that. So you're getting kind of locked into.
I have 2 pages of questions here, but in the interest of time, I'll ask a couple more and then I'll turn it over to the audience. For the average user of AI who's maybe sort of dabbling casually, maybe they're using it to help with their fantasy football picks or checking a reference or planning a trip, how do you convince them of just how dangerous potentially these tools can be?
Maybe I'll start because I feel that I am that average user. Those are exactly the sorts of things that I would feel comfortable.
I drew from my husband, so yeah.
Those are the sorts of things that I personally, at least, would feel comfortable relying on this tool for. And speaking off the cuff, thinking through this in real time, I suspect that that's not actually the person that's going to be hardest to persuade, because the average normal user encounters these tools, yes, in a very sort of casual or low-grade setting, but is also much more open than perhaps the Reid Hoffmans of the world and the maximalists, much more open to being persuaded that this is not a thinking thing, that this can't love you, and that there's any number of things that it might be used for that could be deleterious. What worries me more are the vast numbers of increasingly young and increasingly numerous people who are isolated, being radicalized already on internet forums, and find themselves in the kind of relationship that Jeff, you were describing, of just flattery, ensorcelment. I mean, the guy that's going to go crazy because he fears that his mother is having him surveilled by the government is much more likely to be susceptible to something that can tell him he's right about everything. Because the other thing besides a flatterer that will do that is a sociopath.
By the way, does it bother you that there's absolutely no liability to anything?
Yes.
That's weird to me.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
where's the accountability?
We were talking about the recent AI stories of teens who were sort of guided into suicide, and I was thinking about that Michelle Carter story, right? I mean, she went to prison for convincing her friend to go through with a suicide attempt, and yet the AI machines, we sort of brush it off. Well, it just needs to be trained better. That's the real problem.
Apologize. Whoops, sorry about that.
So when I'm talking to friends and family who aren't AI experts. Like I actually just had dinner last night with one of my aunts who happens to be in DC. She's in her early 80s, right? Very concerned about AI. One thing I do is reassure them, look, you have a lifetime of exposure to science fiction movies, and it's okay to take those seriously as warning shots, right? Ever since Mary Shelley published Frankenstein in whatever, 1816 or something, right? Writers have grappled with the implications of summoning these demons, creating, artificial intelligences, and how does that play out? What'll happen is the EACs, the effective accelerationists, the tech bros will say, oh, all of these worries about AI risk and AI unemployment, that's just science fiction. Yeah, it's only the most insightful analysis of the implications of future technology that people have been arguing about for 200 years, right? You're allowed to take that seriously. And of course, what the EACs will do is any potential upside of AI that science fiction writers have talked about, they consider legitimate and serious and beneficial, and we should focus on that and not the potential downsides. So when you're talking to friends and family and they raise episodes of Black Mirror or The Matrix or Terminators or Ultron or whatever, that's a way in, right? That's a way to start the conversation. And saying, oh, all of this is just science fiction, that's a way to shut down discussion. So don't fall for it.
Perhaps you're familiar with the meme science fiction writer, I have published The Torment Nexus, a cautionary tale about what will occur in the next 100 years. Scientists, we're so delighted to announce that we've produced The Torment Nexus, available now. It's a really good point. That
there's another point that editors and professors can help too. If your student turns in an AI paper and you can prove it, fail them. I can tell you as an editor at Brownstone, I read tons of copy every day. If anybody submits to me an essay that's been written by AI, and I can tell, not an idiot, you're blackballed forever. And I tell you that. How dare you? You're done.
Last question from me, and audience, get ready with your questions. We touched a little bit on the necessity of government regulation. If we could maybe quickly identify some potential areas or policies that might be helpful as we see the growing potential of AI.
Yeah, I mean, if you read the AI action policy from the administration, it was released 2 months ago, roughly. It's 25 pages. It's a little wonky and dense, but you'd actually find it very interesting to see the trajectory of where they're going here, okay? It is very much a pro-innovation, expansion, all fronts. If your average Google search takes 1/10 of the energy that a LLM prompt retrieval does. Okay, so you're seeing a full expansion into energy policy, and quite frankly, in almost every area of energy policy. That you understand, the Trump administration realizes they have massive leverage, right? You don't just go build Stargate in the middle of a cornfield somewhere without massive permitting approvals from the administration for national security, energy policy, all down the line. They have in their language, again, in this recent, very much anticipated AI action plan, that this topic I brought up earlier about procurements, right? If you have demonstrated that you have woke AI or that have biased treatment, you are not going to be in line. We'll see if that happens. Okay, that's at least something, I guess. It's a beginning point in that regard. I think the question really is the longer tail. What happens after Silicon Valley runs out the clock for the next 3 years if they have power and influence and you just toggle back the woke switch to where we were in the Biden regime, and specifically with the outsourcing of scan and ban to globalist supranational organizations. Scan and ban meaning how to scan and censor speech that they determine that everybody in here is a hate monger, you're all racists, and we all need to be sent to the digital gulag. That type of preset is already in place, and we know that. And so I think this administration, is going to certainly buffer against that. But the question is, how long does that last, and where will AI be at the point when power shifts back?
To me, there's really 2 points of leverage, 2 key choke points, hardware and social prestige, right? The hardware required to build these massive data centers is extremely narrow in terms of bottlenecks that can potentially be controlled by governments. There's one company in the Netherlands that creates the photolithography machines that are crucial for advanced chips. There's one company in Taiwan that creates the most advanced chips, right? You can control the hardware supply chain such that AI companies could perhaps just not be allowed to get the chips they need, and then AI shut down. The social prestige is that when you say, oh, I work in AI development for OpenAI or Anthropic, most people in the Bay Area go, cool, oh my God, they're so cool. And if you make it instead as embarrassing, as stigmatized to be an ASI developer as it is to be a Nazi pedophile, that's what we need. We need global grassroots stigmatization of the ASI developers so that they no longer have the social benefits. Yes, OpenAI will still pay them an average of $500,000 to $2 million a year to develop the AIs, but at least they won't have the social prestige.
All right, we have time for a few questions. We have oh my goodness. All right, we have a mic runner. When you get the mic, please state your name and affiliation, and then keep questions short and actually a question, please. No long form statements. Thank you. We'll start right here in the front.
Thank you very much. Preston Knoll with Tradition Family and Property. I have a friend who's a professor at Georgetown, and the first thing he does is say, I know you're going to use ChatGPT, that's just fine, but you need to know the material. So, we're going to run your papers through a detector, and if it comes up, you're in trouble. So, what I want you to do, you write your paper, and then you're going to sit down in front of me and read it. And I'm going to determine if you really know your material. If you don't know your material, you're not going to pass. Do you think this is a viable thing, more medieval style, let's say? I like the medieval thing, by the way.
I mean, absolutely. The tricky thing is, can you scale it to large classes? You can certainly have small group, classical liberal education in St. John's University or University of Austin or whatever. But, I often teach classes, 80, 200 students. I can't do that kind of one-on-one viva voce style thing. So what you'd need is to re-engineer the economics of education, right? So that I actually think it's kind of dumb for like 50% of everybody to try to go to college. I don't think they're suited to it. So I think if you want to preserve universities as real centers of learning, you might need to go back to a kind of older model where people who can genuinely learn by reading and discussing go to universities, and perhaps others go in other directions.
I was
I was just going to say, one of the challenges also that AI detection software is having, universities and in just the pedagogical sphere, is that they often return false positives and generally tend to target non-native speakers. And so a lot of these admin are very, very scared to use that as the arbiter of truth or not, because they don't want to face a lawsuit when the parent or the student says, you have wrongfully impugned my character and now I'm going to sue you for $10 million. So it is there's a lot of pieces, Jenga tower pieces to that puzzle.
Yeah, I was wondering when you were talking about class size, whether you would feel comfortable not teaching those sorts of classes in the long run. And I do think that some of these pressures are going to ultimately select for classes where you don't have to mechanize your teaching. I like the idea in principle of having the kid sit and read his paper that the machine wrote or whatever, but ultimately I don't think we're going to automate our way out of this automation problem. There's creative ways you can use ChatGPT in the classroom. I like to play a game called Man versus the Machine, where I ask the student and ChatGPT the same question, and then the student has to come up with something that ChatGPT hasn't said on its first shot. I mean, there's all sorts of things that you can do, but it's a little bit analogous, I think, to when recently President Trump said something like, if we don't admit Chinese students to our university system, 15% of our schools should fail, and many people said, well, maybe 15% of our schools should fail. And this is sort of similar, if you can't run a university system effectively at this massive scale on the assumption that absolutely everybody needs a postgraduate or graduate level liberal arts education, then maybe you need to reconsider what a liberal arts education is, what it's for, and what sorts of other things people might benefit from.
I heard that people say they can tell if something is written by ChatGPT if it has a lot of M dashes, and I must say I felt very personally attacked
I
by
will
that.
die. I'm going to wait. This is a hill. This is a hill upon which I will die. First of all, humans use M dashes differently than ChatGPT does, and you can tell. And second of all, you can't let the clankers have this one. It's the best punctuation mark out there. I won't give the bots the M dash.
This will be fixed in probably a fortnight, right? Now that it's well known. Yeah.
Well, that makes me feel a lot better. If we do one really, really quick one, I think we can get it in. Who has the best question in here?
You know I do.
All right.
Hi there. Oh, no microphone's fine. Or yes, microphone.
It's working.
Joe Allen with Steve Bannon's War Room. Maybe you've heard of us. It's fascinating to watch the reaction of people who have learned words like transhumanism and artificial intelligence. It's been a crazy year. We had Donald Trump telling us that the world's wealthiest transhumanist is the coolest guy in the world. Second day in office, he tells us that the Stargate project, the explicit goal of which is to develop artificial superintelligence, right? The sand god, the digital god. We're in real trouble when you talk about the social status, especially on the right. So my question is, with Donald Trump pushing the idea that this is the future of America, the coming golden age through artificial intelligence, how do we politely urge him to perhaps stand up for humans against the techno-machine rather than standing up for the techno-machine against humans?
Yeah, let me just say, if you haven't read his book, that's a great place to start. He's too modest to say it, but it is a very, very well-researched piece on transhumanism. I think it's actually one of the best that I've seen, and I've been writing a book for HarperCollins on AI and politics, so I've been reading everybody's book, and that's a good starting place is there. I think you're absolutely right. The one hopeful, I'm trying to be the optimist because I am by nature. The one hopeful thing I think is that the conservative movement, because of books like that and just the broader conversation, I think there is a awareness about the transhumanism threat. I think conservatives are actually pretty coached up, again, because of books and content that you and Steve and others have done. I think that this administration, one of the big things, and this is a fascinating statistic, so if you look at the top 10 companies in the S&P 500, they constitute roughly 40%, and they are roughly 8 out of the 10 are all tech-related. Now, really hear what I just said. 40% of the S&P 500 is spinning on an AI axis, roughly. Okay, and again, it depends on what the fluctuation is. So you're absolutely right. There's going to be this massive tension, and I think personally, I think it starts with conversations like this, but then taking this conversation to the grassroots. It can't just be all the people that sit around ruminating and thinking and reading these things all day. I think we have to be having these conversations. And then highlighting the Transhumanist Project as it's developing, which, the work that's done here, certainly, Dr. Miller on that too. But we've got it. This has got to be part of the common vernacular.
Unfortunately, we have to wrap there. I apologize for cutting you all off. I know there's so much more to say, but huge round of applause for our panelists. And just keep clapping as Wynton and Spencer move the podium back.